And then we were shot up at Bombay, stopping at Agra and Davy. And then we stayed for a week in Kashmir on 3 houseboats.
Right.
Yes. And then one of the excursions that we went with Baba was past this Mount Hermon, where Baba told us that Jesus was buried.
His body had been carried to on
He
the
said
side of the
that
mountain.
after the crucifixion, 2 of the apostles took this body right across to Kashmir and buried it there, and they had terrible hardships. They went through everything, went against them trying to stop them, but the body of Jesus was buried in...
And the Mohammedans believe that too.
How's that spelled?
Kashmir?
No,
Hermon.
H-E-R-M-O-N. H-E-R-M-O-N. And we've got a photograph of it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And as we passed by with Baba, we were in a car, or a sort of a wagon, and all the children, although Baba was incognito, all the children came running after Baba.
And didn't Chanchi tell us then that Baba had been there how many years back, and he'd sat there
in seclusion.
Absolutely
on the side of this mountain, and that Chanchi used to bring water to him. And he was some distance away, and Chanchi came up with water.
And then, of course, he told us that the body of the body that the apostles and the disciples saw was the glorified body of Jesus, not his physical body. You see.
Even this is when they Peter asked to verify that it was Jesus.
Said, yes, that's right.
Thomas, yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Well, did he ever mention which of the disciples transported the body?
Yes, he did.
Not that it's really too important, but I was so curious about that.
Feel justified in telling you. I've got it written down.
I see.
Kitty, which were the 2 apostles that took the body across? He did tell us, but was it and
St. Thomas is the first. I wouldn't like to say that.
I've got it written down in London, but I would like to say now.
But did you mention about that landslide as we were coming back to Rawalpindi?
No.
Because that is what happened. I didn't know when you mentioned about the breaks.
The breaks.
They had a terrible amount of rain, and there was a real landslide, and the road had actually been broken, so that we all had to get out of the cars while the road was being mended, and we were 2 hours walking just up and down, and Baba was pacing up and down, and we were thought, oh, well, what is all this? It seems so peculiar. Because we were being sent back after 3 weeks instead of 6 months. And finally the road got mended, but Baba wouldn't allow us to take our cars until he alone went across it with the driver. He said, no, I cross it alone first. And then afterwards we came along with the driver.
Now, was that when he put us on a fast for the day, just eating
No.
tangerines?
No. This was the day that we were all coming back to Bombay, and then we came down to Rawalpindi, and then we all slept in a station, a thing we'd never done. There were bathrooms there and everything, do you remember?
Yes.
We had to wait until the next morning for the train. And then Baba went back with us, but he never came to Bombay to the docks. He got out 2 stations beforehand, and we had to go to the docks all by ourselves. His Mandalay met us when we got there. It was so sad, wasn't it? It was so sad saying goodbye to Baba.
You see, we were supposed to be going with him to China,
and
then
China,
to America, and we had our visas and everything.
And then at Agra, on the way, Baba said, to call us each one by one, and said, would you mind very much if I had to send you back for work? Not in a group, you see, each one by one, so we got our answers. Of course not, Baba, if it's what you wish. So after he'd had everybody in turn, and they were all willing, then he called us all together and said that it's my wish that you all return after 3 weeks. And you all to go back to your jobs, and we'd given them up our jobs, and everybody...
Yes. Well, I think it's very interesting to explain that. Baba, in one of his letters, has told us that before he could begin to prepare us, he had to separate us from many things. So we all had dogmatic kind of education. We had to be taken away from, say, our country, from the family, from a certain form of education, from many things before we could really begin his work. But what his work is an internal work. It means that we have to, as he said, become plastic.
To break all time.
To break all time. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't love or that
Yes.
you don't have feelings.
Yes.
Because most people breaking ties means sort of drying up. On the contrary, it means living continually in the present moment with deeper feelings, deeper love, as if you drink more of everything. So to do that, he had to take us away, bring you back, keep taking you away,
Oh, yeah.
sending you away, you know what I mean,
Yes.
to sort of mold you. As he says, for instance, for some people, he said, I'm like the great fire of love. And some people, if they come near me, too quickly they'll burn themselves. Some I have to take very carefully, and I push away, and I bring back, and I push away, so as to be able, once you are in me, that is, you fall in this fire, you're not burnt, but you're conscious.
That's very interesting.
I think that, to me, was very interesting.
So that's why when we were in India to begin with, we never wrote letters.
Come on, forgive me there. I just wanted to say goodbye to all of you. Because you want
Are you
to shut me
taking
out in
this?
the
Are
morning.
you in
At 6.
Oh, I'll be up at 6, I think. I can get back
I'll
on
live
the
know
phone.
about you.
It's all been recorded.
We're
Do you-
recording
do you know
something.
the bathroom and everything?
Yes, I know what you're saying.
Kitty, darling, if you interrupt, we can't anymore, darling. It becomes, you take away the mood. Well, I think it's much either. When you're doing a serious work, you do it.
Have
Yes.
you closed it off?
No.
Oh, you can chip that
no.
out.
Yeah, I can cut
No, I
anything
think
out.
I see it.
And if there's anything at all that you wish to have done, that wish to have cut out, this is yours.
We'll erase this. little
Yes,
incident
because
here.
there's no.
May I ask you,
Yes.
in reference to what you were just
Yes.
talking about, you were all aware, of course, that this process was being done, and of course willingly through, or did you realize that this was being done at the time, this
how
conditioning?
do I say?
No, we didn't.
I don't think we
That's
did
one
then.
literally. Baba took us
We
blind.
took Baba literally at the time.
Yeah.
Baba was
Yeah.
part of
Those
the
early
Baba
days,
faith
we
and
had-
everything to us, and we never questioned it, didn't know what he was doing to us at all.
I thought-
We didn't even know he was the Avatar, we didn't even
No.
know he was a perfect master. We were drawn through love, and nothing but love. I had no idea who it was I was really following.
That's very good.
So great was your love that all you wanted to do was to serve him. Those two things were simultaneous from the very moment that I saw Baba. And nothing else.
Well,
ever came
it
into
would
my
be
mind.
interesting to see how you met Bob, how you heard of
This
him.
we've
That's
never
quite
heard.
Interesting.
You think so? I don't know.
Oh, we would like very much to
Well, to
know.
me.
Well, I
You will.
but it might be rather too long.
Can
you
be.
begin to think of what you're going to say afterwards. Well, I mean, I was brought up terribly strict Protestant. I mean, the only idea of following of all religions being heathen, otherwise than the Protestant religion, you see, and so it was always missions to the east and talking to the heathen and all that sort of thing. So I wasn't prepared for anybody from the east at all. And then I got pleurisy and I was in bed for about 3 months. And then my brother brought me while I was in bed this book of Roland to read. Roland Rollins, was it? Ramakrishna, you see. And that was my first insight into masters of any kind. And I remember reading there how it said, you love most when you're least conscious of loving. And that took my fancy, the most extraordinary man. I thought, you love most when you're least conscious of loving. Well, anyhow, I continued with the book and I loved it. And while I was reading it, Herbert, my brother, read in the paper called Light, I think it was, of a certain place in Cornwall.
Devonshire.
Well,
East
yes,
Chalfont.
East Chalfont, you see. And he said, well, the doctor says you should go away for 3 months when you get up. How would you like to go down there? So I said, well, I don't really mind. He said, well, I'll go down and see what it's like first. So he went down to Devonshire to see what this place in East Chalfont was like. And he said, well, it was very beautiful and very nice. He thought we'd go down together. So he came back and we both went down there. And this was run by a man called Meredith Starr. See? And we found out that he had been to India and had been with Baba and for about
6
a year.
months.
Was it 6 months?
He stayed in the jungle with his wife and his sister.
With Baba.
Sister-in-law.
And then Baba sent him home and said, now you find some place in England and start an ashram there. So that sounded all right, and I went down. My brother and I went down the books, right? And then Meredith began reading poems, the left and bust of your feet, wasn't it?
Dedicated to Baba.
Dedicated to Baba. But I didn't take to Meredith very much. And I felt somehow that he was very, very fond of my brother, who was always very interested in the spiritual part. But I didn't know how much he approved of me, but still I stuck it out, you see. And we stayed there for 2 or 3 months, and when we came home, and then we went down again. And while we were there on the second trip, came this cable from Baba to say, love is calling me to the west. And then he was, I think my brother and Meredith together, they found, and other people found the money to bring Baba over. And then he came over, you see, to England. My brother went to meet him at Marseille. And my brother said to Baba on the way up from Marseille, well, now, is Meredith my master, or are you my master? Baba said, I shall be your master from now on. This was interesting, Baba said that. And then Baba came over to London, and Margaret Craske and I were there. Were you there?
No, I met him later, but he stayed at Kitty David's house before he went down to East Chalicum, you see.
Yes, he came straight there, and it was only because my brother was going to China for 5 years at this time that my brother said to my parents, well, now, would you mind do one thing for me before I leave England? And then he said, well, will you mind having my friend from India to come and stay? You see, so the father and mother, I don't know if they wanted it or not, but they couldn't deny their son something that he wanted when he was going away for 5 years, you see. And so Baba arrived one afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We went to Victoria Station to meet him. And on the same time, Gandhi was arriving with his secretary. You know Gandhi? Oh, yes, he was on the same platform, the same train, and he was there. And
that was Baba's first visit to the West. You see,
Baba had
the first in 1931. It's important to put the date.
1931. Baba arrived along with the
September 1931.
The hat on, and underneath his coat was this white sunbonnet that he wears. And two things only I remember. His tremendously sparkling eyes that just went from place side to side. And his wonderful hands. I noticed his fingers.
Such beautiful hands.
Beautiful hands he had. And that I noticed in his sparkling eyes. And then he left, we waited to get the luggage through. And then the taxis were called, and he said, oh, you come along in the taxi. And I went along in the taxi with him to home, you see. And we went right upstairs very quietly. The men had these huge bedding rolls, which I had never sort of seen, you know. Everybody had a huge bedding roll, and the 5 big bedding rolls arrived, and Baba's bedding roll, and up we trotted a London house, you know, right up to the top floor. And there we had made, in one of the rooms, we left a bedroom for Baba and the men, and then one bedroom we had turned into sort of dining room for Baba on the top floor. So we cooked rice and prepared grapes, and I think it had some lentils, and Baba sat down and ate, and the men stood around, and Margaret and I didn't know just what to do, you know, we were there, and then Baba called us to us and gave us a grape each. And then he signified to Meredith what was interpreted to us to say that we were very fortunate that Baba was giving us prasad, you see, that we were to eat the grapes, which we did, and it all seemed very mysterious, and then more rice was brought to the table. And then afterwards Baba moved his seat and sat in a sort of armchair. And then he had a hole in his sadra. So he said, well, tremendous. And of course I was very, very shy, you see. Yeah. So this had to be brought up and sort of mended with a needle. But I produced the needle and the cotton. And then the men interpreted it and said, yes, Baba says, you're very lucky, because this is only the beginning of work that you will do. So that having been done, then Baba left the room and went to another room. And then while he was in the other room, we were all each called separately. And so our turn came, and by that time I think I was in a few tears, I think. I mean, one felt something, you know. And then everybody was called in turn. Margaret came, and then Baba said, well, is there anything worrying you? So we said, well, we didn't think so. So Baba said, well, don't worry. And then he said, I will help you. And those 2 words, don't worry and I will help you, Baba's been continually saying ever since then, you see.
Yeah.
And still, Meredith was that barrier in a way. I mean, we didn't go to Baba unless Meredith sort of asked us to go, you know. Meredith stood by Baba while each of us went in. We had that at the beginning, you know. But Baba afterwards always managed to call us in, or something or other, separately. And then that went on for one night, didn't Baba say? But
then he went down to East
Then
Challicum.
he went down to East Challicum, which was the ashram that was prepared for him down in Devonshire, which Meredith had. And there we met, did you come down there?
No.
No, but there was many there, weren't there? There was, my brother was there, and Margaret Craske was there, wasn't it?
Well, there was quite a group
Quite
of
a
the
group.
early English, you
Edith
know,
Ford,
which
I think.
included Mr. Purdom
Yes,
and
George
quite a lot
Purdom.
of us.
And some who have since died, or William and Mary Abbott, they were there. And the interesting part was that after we'd been there 5 days, Rustam, who was one of those who came over with Baba, he turned to my brother and he said, well, he said, Baba could go back now. He said, he's found what he came for. You see, the beginning of what was to be the Western group. Of course, Baba didn't go back. This was just what one of the disciples said. But so strange was it that the beginning of Baba's group were actually in East Challicum waiting, which made us think of a remark that Baba said. He said, before I take birth, it's all arranged, the time and the place, as you might say, where I will contact those that I have to contact in this incarnation. And it really did seem so. Then from that small little group came others, Kim and Delia, and all those who have been with him really ever since.
Oh,
But I mean, if I had not been ill, I don't think I ever would have come. If I had not read that book on Ramakrishna at that particular moment, being ill in bed and doing nothing, I don't think I could ever have come, because I was much too conservative in my thought. Much too conservative.
Well, I think everybody has had that experience, that they were drawn in some mysterious
Absolutely.
way. And
Mine was no more mysterious than anybody else's, but certainly that was the
No,
preparation.
Well, I don't know. Mine wasn't mysterious at all. I must say, I knew nothing about anything. I had been in Paris, and I'd been all through Europe because I was studying, more or less interested in art, and I'd been visiting different museums. I'd never heard of a master. I'd never heard of anything of that sort. I was very young. So when I came to New York, and I was told, because I'm an old friend, I've been with Princess Matchabelli, Norina. I would like to say something about her life.
Please do.
Because I think that probably many people don't know.
Please do.
Well, you see, Princess Matchabelli, her stage name was Maria Carmi, and she was considered one of the 10 most beautiful. One of the 10 most beautiful women of Europe. I don't know if you know that she was extremely beautiful. And her first husband was Karl Vollmuller, who was a German poet. At the same time, a curious man, a man more or less of genius in an odd way. And before the First War, he had written a play called The Miracle that was really written for her. And there was a very beautiful part called The Madonna, The Miracle. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but I mean, I never saw it, unfortunately. But, and she was a great friend of Reinhardt, Max Reinhardt. And Max Reinhardt put the play, and I think it was very amusing to think that the play was given at Olympia in London.
Just opposite to
And
where
opposite the house of Kitty,
And
not very far
yes.
from the house of Kitty.
And my brother saw her in it.
My brother had seen her.
And so much impression did it make on him that he went 3 times. And 30 years nearly later, when he came to Canada, this is interesting, very, he came over to Nova Scotia, you see. And while he was in Nova Scotia this last year, Norina died. And Elizabeth said, she said, Kitty, she said, I very much want to see that original program, which was when Norina acted in the Olympia. And she said, I have a feeling that your brother may have brought that over with him. So I wrote to my brother in Nova Scotia, this was 30 or 40 years later, and lo and behold, he wrote back and sent it to me and said, yes, I brought it out to Canada with me. He said, nothing that I've ever seen made so deep an impression upon me, and particularly when she stood there holding the child. But I mean, just imagine.
So Princess Matchabelli, that was her second husband, Prince Matchabelli. Her first husband, as I say, was a writer, a poet, and rather curious man. And when she had been very ill, and suddenly they offered her this part of the Madonna. And she always told me how, when she heard of this, somehow she had been very, very ill, and she began to study the part, and she felt much better. She got much, much better. So Reinhardt said she could play the part. And it was given in Europe, you see, in Germany. She was very, very famous in Germany. You can compare, she had the same sort of fame as you think of Anita de Caro. She couldn't go anywhere without people seeing her or remarking. She was extremely beautiful, and her beauty was too much in a way. She would have probably been a much greater actress if she hadn't been so beautiful. Yeah. Her beauty was really, it was impossible to go with the kind of acting she wanted to do. She could only play very royal parts, very extraordinary parts. You don't find many plays with that kind of character. So then she gave, I say, this play. Then she came to America with a play, and she played with Lady Diana Manners. I don't know if you recall. They played it together. One night she played, and the other night she played. So then she began to be interested more or less in spiritual things. But that summer, I wasn't there when she began to be interested in this. I had gone over to Europe, and I told you. And I came back, and she told me about this master, this man who had come. Well, I'd never paid any attention to it. She said to me, you must meet him. And I said, all right, Norina, because it would give her pleasure. I would go and meet this master. So I arrived at this place out in Harmon, outside of New York. And there, I was a little bit skeptical, you see. I'd been brought up very profound Catholic. My mother was very religious and Catholic, and I thought it was very odd, because I had pangs of fear. And then Meredith Starr came out, did you want to meet the master? And he said in such a way that it amused me terrifically. And I went up the stairs, and when I came to the room, I had the most extraordinary experience. I looked at him, and I laughed. I simply howled with laughter. I came up to Baba. It was something I'd always have known. As if he'd suddenly disguised himself and I knew it. He said to me, do you know why I am? I said, of course I do. And all the Indian boys and all of us just had a hilarious party of laughing.
That's wonderful.
I felt as if there was nothing to say. And I've never asked a question to Baba. There'd never been anything to ask him. The first moment I saw him, and he said to me, I said, I've just returned from Paris. He asked me where I'd been this summer. I said, I'd been in Paris studying art and painting. She said, well, I've never posed for anyone, but you'll pose for me. And to me, it was a little bit difficult, because I wasn't very much interested in the natural art, you see, the kind of, let's say, a realistic form of art. My interpretation of art was more or less going towards an abstract way. Yeah. And then I was sort of young, and I didn't know much about painting a portrait. He said, would you like to paint my portrait? And I didn't dare say no. I said, yes, I would. And then I realized when Bob was posing for me, it was almost impossible to paint him, because it was very extraordinary watching him, since the color of the skin changes. The eyes change continually, so that what you try to paint and what you would try to what you saw was two different things. One was extremely fleeting and extremely living, so that it was almost impossible to look at him and keep painting. But I went on with this dreadful painting, which was really the most inartistic thing I can think of. And Baba found, after an hour and a half of posing, which I thought was quite enough, and he nodded and it was finished. We would continue another day. As you know, experiences with Baba never repeat. That's the wonderful thing. There's no repetition in any experience with Baba. You see?
I can understand.
There mustn't be.
Oh, that's interesting. I can that you mention it, but it never occurred to me in any way that
once Baba's work is done, I mean, there's no need to repeat it. That's why people say that, well, he changes. He must change that way, because everything is an internal experience.
And it's the present.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
It's internal. So that what may seem to you of unimportance in the moment, say 10 years or 15 years from now, you see absolutely there was a very conscious act, and a very conscious, something extremely conscious. And that experience is there. It needs no repetition. what is terribly interesting to realize that Princess Matchabelli, who had this extraordinary life, as I say, she was one of the most beautiful women in the world. She's had everything. She had fame, she had beauty, she had success. What I think was extremely sad when she saw. She said, before, everyone who loved me took away something. And it's the first time I feel that love is giving me something.
I can understand that.
It's very interesting to have it come from a woman of her worldly experience and of the beauty, you say. It didn't come from someone who's never been loved, let's say. She said, the first time,
so wonderful.
She said, it's the first time I feel that love is bringing me something.
Well, may I say?
Yes.
When the first time that Baba came over to the States,
Yes.
were you with him then?
Yes, I met Bob the first time he
That's
came
when
to
you
the
met
States. Yes, the first
Well,
time I met him.
But the link there was someone from England came and told Jean Adrian and her husband about Baba. This young poet, Milo, who was at East Chalacum. And Jean and Malcolm, as she described in her book, were on the point of going over to England to meet Baba when the cable came that Baba wanted to come to America. And then Jean gathered round the group round her who would...
No, it wasn't
meet
Jean.
Baba.
I mean, yes, she
Well,
just-
Jean arranged Harmon.
Yes, she arranged
I
Harmon.
mean, she was the, and then brought the others. And Meredith Starr was the... I mean, he did wonderful work for Baba. Baba's always said that because it was his courage in throwing up everything and going to India, and he was able then to come back and make the link for Baba at East Chalacum.
It seems that was an extremely important link because there's
Yes.
Kitty and...
But then that was true originally. Rustam, this marvelous disciple of Baba's, Ardi's elder brother, was sent over to England to try and get some English boys to go out to the school. Baba had this school then in which he was training boys to be spiritual. But Rustam couldn't get permission to take these boys because, you know what, the MPs got suspicious and everything. And he was then introduced to Meredith Starr. And Meredith said to him, have you got any illumination because you're charged with such terrific power? And Rustam said, no, but I've been sent by my master. And Meredith then said, I want to go to India.
To India, you mean?
Yes, Baba gave permission. He went to India with his wife and his sister-in-law. After 6 months, as Kitty explained, Baba sent him back and said, you are to find this place and start a center there, and when you do, I will come to the West.
Oh, I see. Then this ashram was begun with Baba's
Yes.
express
It was.
desire.
Meredith could never have got it going if it hadn't been with Baba's power coming back.
I see.
And when Meredith had gathered to East Chalacum the people that Baba really wanted to meet, Baba then sent a cable, I'm coming to the West. In the meantime, the link from America was there too.